Well, good morning and welcome to the October 2019 public session of the Campaign Finance Board. The first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the September 12, 2019 meeting. I move their approval. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstention? The motion carries. Next item of business is the report of the chair. Last week, the board distributed public matching funds to one candidate for city council in the 2019 general election. This payment was based on campaign filings submitted on October 4th. All of the disclosures, including independent expenditures for the 2019 cycle, are available for review on the CFB's website. The next disclosure deadline for the public advocate and council district 45 races is Friday, October 25th. The debate, originally scheduled for Thursday, October 10 in the general election for public advocate, was not held. Only one candidate met the legally mandated threshold to participate. Under city law, two or more candidates must qualify for a debate to be held. A second leading contenders general election debate is scheduled for Tuesday, October 29th. To qualify for that debate, candidates must have raised and spent a minimum of $136,650 as reflected in the campaign finance disclosure statement filed on October 25th. Additionally, candidates must satisfy an endorsement or small dollar contributor criterion to qualify for the leading contenders debate. If held, the leading contenders debate will be broadcast by Spectrum News, NY1, and simulcast on NYC Life, the flagship station owned by the City of New York. I'll now turn to our Voter Assistance Advisory Committee Chair, Naomi Zouderer, for her report.
Thank you, Chair Schaefer. Starting next Saturday, city voters will begin voting in the 2019 general election. Finally, for the first time in state history, city voters will enjoy early voting. For 9 days, starting on Saturday, October 26th, and ending on Sunday, November 3rd, New Yorkers will be able to go to an assigned early voting poll site to cast their ballot. To help encourage New Yorkers to take advantage of this new opportunity, NYC Votes has launched a digital PSA campaign with an animated video about voting early. You can help us spread the word. Visit NYC Votes on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter to find and share our video. Each voter has been assigned to vote at a specific early voting poll site that may differ from their election day poll site. Each voter should have already received this information in the mail, but please encourage all voters to visit voting.nyc and click on Where to Vote to confirm their early voting and election day poll sites. Poll sites will not be open on Monday, November 4th, the day before Election Day. So what's on the ballot? New Yorkers will decide 5 ballot questions proposed by the 2019 Charter Revision Commission and elect a candidate for public advocate to serve the remainder of the current term until 2021. Voters in Queens will be electing a new district attorney, and voters in Brooklyn City Council District 45 will select a legislator to represent them through 2021. There are also various judicial offices on the ballot. All New York City voters should consult the NYC Votes voter guide for information about the ballot questions and candidates on their ballot. Print guides have been mailed to every household. Visit voting.nyc to read the online guide. For the first time, the candidate video statements in the online voter guide include American Sign Language interpretations, making the guide more accessible to the more than 200,000 New Yorkers who are deaf or hard of hearing. NYC Votes worked with the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities and Democracy NYC to make these improvements possible. And with that, I will turn it over to the Executive Director, Amy Loprest.
Just a brief update. The staff continues to prepare for the 2021 citywide statewide elections, as we are also moving to educate and engage voters for the 2020 presidential election and state elective offices. We anticipate that there'll be upwards of 500 candidates participating in the program for the 2021 elections, and so we are busy implementing the new laws and regulations to prepare for that election.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is our announcement of campaigns and compliance. The following candidates from the 2017 elections have completed the post-election audit process without any violations and penalties assessed by the Campaign Finance Board. The board recognizes the diligence of the candidates and their campaign staff in running campaigns that maintained compliance with New York City's campaign finance law. Of these campaigns, the first 4 of the 5 are first-time candidates with the CFB. So the candidates in compliance are Anthony Rivers, who was a candidate for City Council District number 27, Mohammed Rahman, candidate for City Council District number 24, Vanessa Aronson, a candidate for City Council District number 4, Jabari Brisport, a candidate for City Council District number 35, and Chaim Deutsch, a candidate for City Council District number 48. We have 2 candidates appearing before us today in connection with proposed penalties and or repayments. And the first one on our agenda is Robert Ganji. Mr. Ganji, you're here, and would you and your representative take a seat at the table? CFB attorney and staff will take a seat at the other table. Just a brief word about how we proceed.
Sorry.
The staff of the CFB will make a very brief opening that just tees up the issue, not really a opening statement, just kind of a summary of why we're here. And then I'll ask you to make your presentation. There will likely be questions from members of the board. When you're done, I'll ask the CFB staff if they'd like to respond, and so we will proceed. So let's get going.
Right. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Schaefer, members of the board, Executive Director Loprest, Mr. Ganji, and Mr. Bryant. I'm Joseph Gallagher, Senior Associate Counsel for the CFB, and I have with me today Celia Liang, a Senior Auditor for the CFB. Before the board this morning is the matter of the Robert Ganji campaign in the 2017 primary election for mayor. The campaign was a participant in the program and did not receive public funds. CFB staff recommends that the board find the campaign committed the following 4 violations of the Act and board rules: failing to demonstrate compliance with reporting requirements for receipts, failing to file disclosure statements, accepting over the limit contributions, and failing to respond to the draft audit report. The campaign contests these violations and penalties.
Okay, the ball's in your court.
Well, he misstated everything. I'm kidding. I laid out, I assume the staff showed you the letter that I sent, and I laid out our explanations for where we didn't comply with the requirements. So a couple of things by way of background. This was the first time that I was ever involved in a campaign. I think the first time for Richard also. So we were, it was a grassroots campaign, an issue-oriented campaign. We didn't expect to win. We wanted to raise some, what we consider to be some critical issues relating to social justice, racial justice, and criminal justice that we didn't think were getting enough attention in the public discourse. So that another part of the backdrop, and I don't know if this kind of circumstance figures into your decisions, but my personal financial situation is it's not exactly dire, but it's difficult. My wife is physically handicapped. I am working with a group called the Police Reform Organizing Project, but I am unpaid. So we're totally dependent on Social Security and income from retirement funds, which are dwindling because Social Security isn't enough to pay our expenses. So if we get fined the 14 grand, that means, and again, I don't know if you guys consider something like this, it comes out of my personal finances to pay that off. The fine came, or the notice about the fine or the penalty came, what I consider to be late, in the sense that it was 20 months after the end of the primary. And so there was no chance that I could raise the money to help me defray the expenses that the fine creates for me and my wife, Barbara, personally. In terms of the specifics, Richard and I attended the 4.5-hour workshop, so it might have been information that was conveyed to us, but I did not know that there would be, once we weren't receiving any public contributions, I didn't know there was any limits on the amount of money that I could give the campaign. And as your own figures show, the campaign was, the finances were very, very modest. We had a total receipts of about 87 grand. I contributed about 70 grand. Initially, I thought that what I was giving to the campaign would be loans and we'd be able to pay it back. Donations. And that's the largest fine relates to the fact that I exceeded the limits on what an individual candidate, or I think an individual candidate can give to a campaign. And again, I don't know if that circumstance figures into your decisions, but I was not aware at the time I was making those contributions that I was violating any condition of the campaign finance law. And then the final point is, this was a very modest campaign. We were campaigning in the Democratic primary for mayor. We had a total of less than $90,000 in receipts and expenditures. I contributed 70 grand of that because of my commitment to the issues and the commitment to the campaign. And the part of the irony for me on a personal basis is not only did I lose by significant margin, which was painful, then it turns out that we're being fined $14,000 for what I consider to be an earnest and a fair effort. And also, there's no suggestion that we misspent any of the money on things that didn't have to do directly with the campaign. Richard?
I don't have anything to add to that, Bob. I think you covered it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry. Can you just identify yourselves for the court reporter?
Oh, I'm Robert Ganji. I was the candidate.
Richard Bryant, the treasurer.
Just want to say this is a light note, but I received, I think it was 3.1% of the vote. And de Blasio received something like 74% of the vote. And it reminded me of a quote that one of my sons put in his high school yearbook. And it was from a Chicago Bulls basketball player. I forget the name of the player. It was after a game that the Chicago Bulls had played. This was back in the 90s. And his quote was, "This game will be forever remembered as a game in which I and Michael Jordan combined for 71 points." The man making the statement scored 2 points, and Michael Jordan scored 69 points. And so after the results came in, and I was disappointed, and I said to my son Jess, who put the quote in his high school yearbook, he's now in his 40s, I said, well, at least I could reference that, whatever humorous quote. And then he said to me, but Dad, the point of that quote was the play was highlighting the greatness of Michael Jordan. I don't think you intended to highlight Bill de Blasio's greatness.
I just have one question, because the other large penalty relates to failure to file disclosure statements. I'd like to have some sense as to what the reason was for that.
At a certain point, we were finding, Richard and I, that the requirements were burdensome, and I, at that point, too, knew I wasn't going to get any public funding from the finance board, and Richard communicated to me that, and he was already working at a significantly reduced rate. That's the only way we could have afforded his services. That it would take him a significant amount of time to submit the information, compile and submit the information that was being required, and that was going to be an additional expense for the campaign, which had limited funds. I already knew, again, we weren't going to get any money from the campaign finance arrangement. And also, I knew we weren't misspending any of the money. Everything could be accounted for. So I told him, and it was against his better judgment, to take a pass on it. So that's how that came about.
I mean, this is troubling. The law is clear that financial disclosure statements must be filed whether or not you're receiving public funds. It's not only a legal requirement, but it really goes to the heart of our system because the public filings are public and are intended for the voters of the city to know where each campaign is getting its funding and support from. And so I must say, I think your explanation strikes me at least as a bit cavalier on a matter of real importance. I mean, it's not, the purpose of the law is not merely to prevent misspending of public funds, which concededly did not occur here, and in many of our cases does not occur, but it also is designed to create transparency, and that requirement you just kind of blew off.
No, I understood that, and I knew that it would certainly come across as cavalier. I was making a judgment about. There was a couple of things that I was thinking about when I made that judgment, and I appreciate your remarks. I think they're fair and on point. The one was the amount of time that Richard would have to, and his staff would have to give to fulfill the requirements and comply with the requirements, and the limited funds that we had in the campaign. And the other consideration, and I understand what you're saying, this doesn't exactly address the point, is I knew everything that we were doing was fair, on the up and up. And if anyone in the public or even you guys said, can you account for your money? I knew we could do that. And at the same time, to repeat what I just said, I appreciate your point. And it was not a decision I made lightly. And at the same time, I knew that the response of the board could be just what you laid out.
I just add, there's one email that I didn't include as an exhibit where the campaign was explicitly told about the contribution limit for Mr. Ganji being $14,850. They confirmed that information. They tried to decertify out of the program. The decertification deadline had already passed. And the exhibit 3 in the board memo does kind of lay out what we're talking about here. And in Mr. Ganji expressing that he has chosen to disengage with the agency after not being granted public funds or being eligible to participate in the debate. And that's where communication ceased from that point going forward. And the one other thing about the no allegations of public funds being misspent, one thing about the contribution limit is to prevent a candidate from self-funding after not qualifying for public funds. For other candidates for mayor who didn't go that route, it would be, unfair.
I knew we were spending a lot less money than anybody else, so I didn't think that my contributing the amount of money that I ended up contributing would be perceived as being sort of either unfair or excessive. And so again, it sounds like what you're saying is that you communicated with me, not you, but the staff communicated to me that we were exceeding the limits that I can contribute.
Yeah, I have a copy of it here.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
with Vivian Chung, who wasn't a...
Excuse me. Sure. This is an email that you sent?
No, that your campaign reached out for staff.
This went to Vivian, huh? I don't remember receiving this. I might have.
All right. Anything further from either side?
Who did she copy on this?
Vivian is a staff person for Richard, Vivian Chung. Yeah, I don't remember receiving that, but I might have and
Yeah.
not paid attention to it.
CC's.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she was our very excellent bookkeeper who did great work. But at one point I had to tell her, I can't afford to pay you.
Okay. Anything further? All right, we're going to hear one from one other campaign, and then we'll deliberate. Thank you very much.
So do we wait, or you can keep?
That's up to you. Normally, the deliberations don't take that long,
Mhm.
so and we probably need another 15 minutes in open session. Then we'll go and deliberate and come back. If you'd like to wait, you're welcome to. If not,
Or then
notify
what?
I could call you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, thank you very much. Appreciate your hearing us out.
Thank you. Mr.
Okay,
Kennedy.
thank you. The next item on our agenda is a candidate appearance by Barry Grodenchik. So you've listened to what occurred before, and you were here not that long ago.
Yes.
So I don't need to go through the ground rules with you. I'll ask the staff of the CFB to begin.
Good morning again. I'm Joseph Gallagher, Senior Associate Counsel for the CFB, and I have with me today Sonia Simos, an auditor for the CFB. Before the board this morning is the matter of the Barry Grodenchik campaign in the 2017 primary and general election for City Council, District 23 in Queens. The campaign was not a participant in the program and did not receive public funds. CFB staff recommends that the board find the campaign committed the following 4 violations of the Act and board rules: failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting and documentation requirements, failing to demonstrate compliance with reporting requirements for receipts, filing a late disclosure statement, and failing to respond to the draft audit report. The campaign contests 3 of these violations and penalties.
Okay, Mr. Grodenchik, the floor is yours.
I'm actually Steve Bihar. I'm representing the campaign. Councilman is actually trying to make it here. He had a conflict. There's a finance committee meeting at 10 o'clock. So he's going to try to run from City Hall as soon as he can get here.
Thank you.
But I'll take it from here. I don't think there's a lot. So unless he's here pretty shortly, I think he'll miss it.
Apologize for the misidentification.
No problem.
Visual memory isn't what it once was.
No, I was here last time, but sure. It's Steve, Steve. Last name is Bihar, Behar.
Are you a
And-
lawyer or are you on staff?
I'm an attorney. And I appreciate the upgrade, but not the councilman. I'm going to take this from the number of the disputes here from the back forward. So I'm going to start with number 4, which was failing to respond to the draft audit report. And I'll preface this by saying that I'm certainly not claiming that myself, who has been through many of these, both as a candidate 10 years ago and as a representative, of being unsophisticated. Neither is the councilman and neither is his treasurer. But what happened with the draft audit report was this request came at the same time that we were, for lack of a better term, battling with the audit staff for the 2015 campaign. Obviously the councilman won a special in 2015, then was reelected in 2017. And this simply fell through the cracks as confusion between requests for documents for 2015 versus 2017. And, I apologize for it. Like I said, our treasurer is not unsophisticated, but it was just, there was papers going back and forth between the audit staff and the 2015 campaign. And I think this came into the treasurer and he thought it was part of the 2015 that we had already responded to. So that was simply just a miscommunication. We didn't participate. We didn't take any money, just for the record. That was why we missed this. We were preparing for the 2015 audit, and this kind of fell through because it just basically showed up in the middle of like this very hectic time of going back and forth with the audit staff for 2015. So that is the explanation for number 4. For numbers 1 and 2, we were getting documentation for the staff. And I think part of the issue here, if, listening to the last person at this hearing, some of this goes to the fact that, we're dealing with audits that go, 2-3 years. I ran for city council in 2009 unsuccessfully. My hearing and audit took 4 years. And when you're dealing with requests and audits 2-3 years later, there really isn't a campaign at that point. It's really whoever's left around to get documents together. And in this case, we were dealing with something that was 2 years after a campaign. And we were getting the documents together as requested. And again, we didn't participate mainly because we didn't want to have the intense audit. We appreciate the program. We appreciate the idea of public funding. But if you lose an election, 2-3 years later, you've moved on. If you win an election, 2-3 years later, you're governing. And when you're put up with deadlines, 2-3 years later, you've got to take a day off of work. You've got to use a vacation day. You've got to spend your weekend working on this. So what happened was I was getting the receipts and the documentation requested for the staff. And I took a day off on a Friday when it was due, and about 4:30 in the afternoon, I called Mr. Gallagher and I said, listen, I had everything together, but the labor-intensive function of scanning and copying all the bank receipts was taking me too long, and I'm not going to get it done by 5 o'clock. Do you want to give me an extension to get you the whole package, or do you want me to submit everything but the bank statements and give them to you on a future date? Mr. Gallagher suggested on the phone, send me everything you have and just get me the bank statements when you can. So I emailed him everything but the bank statements. And in that conversation, Mr. Gallagher said, I asked him, how long should it take? He said, well, he said, don't take too long, but they're not going to look at this stuff for a while. So it wasn't like I needed to get it by Monday. So 2 weeks later or so, I got an email on, say, a Monday or a Tuesday from Mr. Gallagher saying if I didn't get it to him by Friday, that they wouldn't accept it. So, honestly, that week was several hearings and a stated council meeting. I couldn't take a day off of work to do it. I wound up doing the labor-intensive work of making all the copies, and I handed them in the following week. I actually came here and dropped them off. So, for the record, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting is actually incorrect. It was giving the documents a week after we were given this kind of falling out of the sky deadline that we didn't expect to. And it's the same thing with failing to compliance with reporting for receipts. We gave them to them. It's not as if we didn't. I walked personally in one of the days where we were working at City Hall. I walked here and actually handed them myself. It was just, they were a week after a deadline that was imposed, just like dropped out of the sky on us. As a matter of fact, we run, just because of the problems with cash, we virtually run a cashless campaign. We will take up to the maximum amount of donations of cash, but we spend no cash. If you look into the filings of both the 2015 and the 2017 campaigns, we did not spend 1 penny in cash just for recording purposes, to make sure that everything is straight and narrow and easily audited. We didn't spend a dime on expenditures on cash. Everything was paid by check, online payments, or by debit card. So the idea that we failed to demonstrate compliance is wrong. We failed to demonstrate within the deadline that was kind of thrown at us at the last minute.
When were these submitted? Sorry.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
When were these submitted?
They were, I forgot the exact dates. We were
Ago, 2 months ago, 2 weeks ago.
it was several months. It was several months ago.
So he's referring to bank statements, which we did accept. And the bank statements that were received reduced one of the violations, or eliminated 2 violations and reduced the penalty. What he's referring to is deposit slips. So the campaign's enforcement notice was due on May 3rd. The campaign asked for and received a 1-month extension to June 3rd. When the campaign submitted their response, which is Exhibit 2 here, it's a 1-page written response. And then bank statements followed that response, which were reviewed and analyzed. The deposit slips, he requested more time to submit in a phone call that we had that he referenced. I then said, yes, please submit the deposit slips as soon as possible. I didn't receive them in 2 or 3 days. So I emailed him that day and I said, your deadline to submit these deposit slips is June 14th. That was a week before, on June 6th, that I emailed him. This is Exhibit 3. And then on June 14th, I followed up the day that they were due and saying, I'm following up on the below email. I haven't received the deposit slips that you intended to submit. This is the final day that they can be received.
When were they ever submitted?
Never.
I think we're getting confused
back
between
to
bank
first.
statements and deposit slips. The bank statements were submitted, and the penalty is a result of a discrepancy, not a failure to submit, because the bank statements showed somewhat more expenditures than were reported. So that seems to me is not curable. With respect to the deposit slips, Mr. Gallagher is saying those were in fact never submitted. Do you have a different recollection of that?
Yes, I do. We sent the bank. We sent I dropped off the bank the deposit tickets and the bank receipts for cash. There shouldn't be any discrepancy here. It should be just the fact that I gave it in. I think he said June 14th.
They've never been received. Deposit slips have never been received by email, by hand delivery.
We hand delivered them.
Do you know to whom?
It was at the front desk. I don't have the receipt, but they gave us a yellow receipt.
Well, the receipt was, the receipt would be because the bank statements were given on that same day. So, the receipt would not be dispositive anyway.
And then in reference to the DAR was issued 5 months after the election, not 2 years, and received 2 extensions to respond to that as well, and then no response.
Anything else?
I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll now go into deliberations on these two matters. Thank you.
One of the things that was requested from us was the return of whatever was in the bank, the account balance. We had discussed during this proceeding for the 2015 that the number that the staff was requesting was $770. And the bank had about $15 in it. And if you read the transcript of your deliberation and your recommendation at the end, you said, quote unquote, that the bank seems to be a moving target and that whatever's in the bank, we should return. I have given the staff the bank statement immediately following that to show that there was a very minimal amount in there, yet the staff is still asking for $770. So I just wanted to lay that we haven't been able to settle that with the staff. And I've asked for them to look back at the transcript because you clearly said that the balance was, your term was a moving target.
Yeah, and we're not equipped to deal with this
No, I
right now.
understand.
So if you could put that in writing.
No, I just wanted to bring the attention to it because I haven't been able to get anywhere with the staff on
Okay.
that.
Well, someone will look into it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're back in open session. I'm going to read a proposed set of findings as to violations and recommended penalties and/or repayments, which include a number of candidates who did not appear today. So this list will appear somewhat longer than you might have thought for those of you who sat through today's session. And then we'll follow up with a motion to approve all of this. So the first candidate is Adrian Adams, a candidate for City Council District 28. The board finds the following violations and is recommending the following penalties. 1, failing to report transactions in daily pre-election disclosure statements, $300. 2, exceeding the expenditure limit, $494. 3, late response to a request for documentation and information, $456, for total penalties of $1,250. Next, Royston Antoine, candidate for City Council District Number 41. 1, failing to provide bank statements, $91. 2, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting and documentation requirements, $199. 3, failing to demonstrate compliance with reporting requirements for receipts, $227. 4, filing a late disclosure statement, $113. 5, failing to file a disclosure statement, $170. 6, accepting contributions from corporations, limited liability companies, or partnerships, $379. 7, failing to respond to the draft audit report, $500, for total penalties of $1,679. Next, Inez Barron, City Council District Number 42. 1, making impermissible post-election expenditures, $311. 2, filing a late response to the draft audit report, $400, for total penalties of $711. Next, Marat Filler, candidate for City Council District 48. 1, failing to document transactions, $369. 2, failing to demonstrate that spending was in furtherance of the campaign, $144. 3, making impermissible post-election expenditures, $259, for total penalties of $772. Next, Edie Fox, candidate for City Council District Number 35. 1, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting and documentation requirements, $56. 2, failing to file a disclosure statement, $750, for total penalties of $806. Next, Robert Ganji, candidate for mayor. 1, failing to demonstrate compliance with reporting requirements for receipts, $337. 2, failing to file disclosure statements, $6,071. 3, accepting over-the-limit contributions, $2,500. 4, failing to respond to the draft audit report, $876, for total penalties of $9,784. Next, Barry Grodenchik, candidate for City Council District Number 23. 1, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts and reporting requirements, $547. 2, failing to demonstrate compliance with reporting requirements for receipts, $250. 3, filing a late disclosure statement, violation but no penalty. 4, failing to respond to the draft audit report, $1,000, for total penalties of $1,797. Finally, Donovan Richards, candidate for City Council District 31. 1, failing to report transactions, $375. 2, failing to demonstrate compliance with cash receipts reporting and documentation requirements, $365. 3, filing late disclosure statements, $300. 4, accepting over-the-limit contributions, $6,260, for total penalties of $7,300. I move the approval of those findings and penalties. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Yes. I see that now. I need to go back and add, with respect to candidate Marat Filler, City Council District Number 48. We've just approved penalties, but there's also a recommended public funds repayment of $108. So I'll make that as a separate motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. I'd also like to move the dismissal of a complaint filed with respect to the campaign of Adrian Adams in 2017. I move the dismissal of that complaint. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next, I move that we ratify a special election public funds payment of,
I apologize. That was it's actually a general election payment, ratify a general election payment for the City Council District 45 election to Farrah Lewis of $18,050.
thank you for that correction. I move the ratification of that payment. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. I'll now move that we go into executive session and then immediately adjourn, since we will have no business to return to in public session. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The meeting is over. Thank you.